Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Black children are targets in America, especially in America's schools. These days, though, the enemy is stepping up those attacks against black children. The measures being instituted across the country are for the sake of waging race war, and to wage it against black children. Every time we look up on a near-daily basis, we see yet another story about a black child being assaulted by some racist in the classroom calling themselves a teacher. We see black children being called nigger by white teachers and even classmates. We see black children having their heads shaven in public, which they don't do to white students, but is done as a means to humiliate and otherwise degrade black children. These are not freak occurrences. So you have to understand this is a concerted and coordinated effort. Now, the most recent tsunami of anti-black racism against black children in schools began shortly after the Orange Man got elected in 2016. Almost the instant that he got sworn in as president, in came this heavy barrage of harassment against black kids in school. You had schools such as down in Louisiana telling black student athletes that they were going to be required to stand for the national anthem and there would be punishment if they didn't. Louisiana, of course, is Klan country, and the city where this occurred is over 70% white Republicans, so again, this is white right-wingers pulling stunts in areas where they're the majority of the government. This is the political equivalent of shadow boxing in your own living room. You can pretend to be tough because you think that there's no penalties. And then the ACLU sent that school a letter reminding them that any attempt to force students to stand for the national anthem or to punish them for not standing for it would be a violation of the Constitution. And as everybody knows, the ACLU's entire job is to sue people who are breaking those constitutional laws. The good old boys down there haven't been so vocal about it since. But that wasn't all. Also in 2017, you had the case of the harassment and targeted threatening of Marie Oliver, who was a senior at Klein Oak High School in Texas, 25 miles from Houston, by the way. She refused to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in protest of how black people are treated in the United States. And she was right to do so. Black children should never pledge allegiance to a nation whose very mission is our oppression and, if possible, extermination. According to Miss Oliver, a number of teachers in her school made it a point to harass and bully her over this. And of course, the school authorities did absolutely nothing about it. Now, what makes this particularly galling is that there was a very famous Supreme Court case back in the 1940s and 1943 to be specific, about school students not saluting the American flag. We're talking about West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett. The West Virginia State Board of Education lost the case before the Supreme Court, and that case was the one that established that no government, local, state, or federal, can demand that students be forced into any sort of patriotic or religious display, such as saluting the flag or taking the Pledge of Allegiance. But of course, in that case, the plaintiffs were white children. But it wasn't just the teachers' demands that Miss Oliver say the Pledge of Allegiance that was so sickening. She was harassed and bullied by a number of teachers at her school, and this went on for years. One teacher in particular, a sociology teacher named Benji Arnold, told Miss Oliver that he would give all zeros in his class if she refused to take the Pledge of Allegiance. But apparently, her taking a stand put a spine into some of those other students because apparently, according to the teacher's remarks, he was having trouble out of the other students on this front as well. But as he put it, you can have all the beliefs and resentment and animosity that you want. He was even caught on video saying that he'd pay for the students to go to Europe if they didn't like living in the U.S. I guess the bastard thought that that would be a little too on the nose if he said he would offer to send them to Africa. Miss Oliver's mother, with help from a group called American Atheist and a Houston-based lawyer, sued Arnold, resulting in a recent settlement for $90,000. Chicken feed compared to what she should have gotten, but it should be added that the money came from the so-called Texas Association of School Boards. That's an allegedly nonprofit group that basically works as a front for these school boards to pull their money that they get from the taxpayers so that they can pay to defend racists like this Arnold scumbag, which is what they use the money for. The Texas Association of School Boards paid the legal fees for this Arnold puke and the school in question, and they paid the settlement money too, which, since these are elected officials, that means the taxpayers paid for all this. Now, I want to know, where's the Democratic Party while all this is going on? Where are the Democrats at the county and state level in Texas pushing for policies to make these school districts bankrupt and to make it harder for racist teachers to use qualified immunity to escape punishment for their crimes? But then again, why would the Democrats want qualified immunity to go away? Qualified immunity, as a legal concept, was created to protect politicians long before it was extended to police and teachers. So Democrats understand that to weaken qualified immunity for teachers or the police would be to weaken it for themselves. So for those of you who wondered why the Democrats could never find a way to do anything about qualified immunity, it's because they didn't want to. And of course, these racist teachers are also attacking black children as a means of encouraging white racist classmates to join in. We've seen everything from black students getting jumped to nooses being hanged at schools. And the point of these racist teachers attacking black children in class and calling them niggers and saying, we'll throw you guys out of here and we're going to give you all zeros, it was meant as a means to encourage the other students, non-black students, to go after the black children as well. Recently, you had the case at Locust Grove High School in Henry County, Georgia. There was an incident where a white student called a black student nigger. This led to a physical confrontation, but whereas the black student was suspended for this, the white student who initiated the confrontation was not. And then the black students got together and staged a walkout last Thursday. And now the racism of the school is coming out for everyone to see. The students are telling everyone they don't feel safe going to a predominantly white school. Now, that's an important point to make because one of the ploys that the white rights incompetent operative class like Christopher Rufo have tried to do is to pass laws that these inbred red states put on the books meant to scare teachers from saying that the country is inherently racist. Oh, you can't say that there's anything uncomfortable when it comes to racism in America. This is yet another example of the racist right's asinine ploys backfiring in their faces. The teachers aren't having to say anything. The students are saying it. They didn't leave a loophole in the law. They left a doggone chasm. You can't prohibit what the students say when it comes to race, but this blatant, constant anti-black racism in the schools, this is not some unintended byproduct of these Christopher Rufo types. This was his plan all along. This is what I call the Christopher Rufo effect. This performative racism where these white supremacists try to go over the top with some blatantly illegal action so that they can try to get a pat on the back from the other racists. And they're targeting black children to be harassed, bullied, and selectively punished because they're testing the black community with these stunts. They want to see if we'll stand up for black children's right to dignity and safety. Because a people who do not act when their children are being attacked are a people who won't fight for anything. We've got to show these white supremacists that black children are being taught to stand up for themselves. They recognize the racism that they happen to be saturated in this putrid, racist apartheid state every day, and that black children are going to be resisting. You're going to be facing resistance in the classrooms, resistance on the playgrounds, resistance in the principal's office. You're going to be facing resistance at the school board meetings, resistance on all fronts. And it's going to be black children who understand they have the right to resist, and that's going to engender in them a duty to resist. A number of them who have been going along with this message simply because they don't see anybody else standing up. But as Marie Oliver proved at her school, one person stands up and the rest of them do too. And that's what also happened at that Locust Grove High School. You had this one black sister there. She made it a point. Hey, we got to stand up when we see this kind of mess happening. And not surprisingly, they found out that they were not alone. And this is where the youth have no respect for their elders. Why should they be respecting their elders when the kids are having to fight their battles all by themselves? You're supposed to have them parents down there raising holy hell about this. These are your freaking kids. Now, why is it important to make sure that black children in particular fight white supremacy every chance they get, resisted every chance they get, refuse to comply every chance they get? Why is our continued and persistent defiance to white power's demands important? Because, as I've taught you, white supremacy subjects its victims to a daily breaking process. Daily is the operative term there. They put you into a cycle of abuse, and it's up to you to break that cycle. Because every day they want you to be reminded that you are a subjugated and oppressed people. But no system of oppression can last for very long unless you get the oppressed to become accomplices in their own enslavement. So you have to make them salute the flag of their oppressors, sing a national anthem written by a slave owner, take a pledge of allegiance to a nation that has no allegiance to them. Now, what sane person would ever agree to any of that? A broken, defeated people. That's who. But you got to make sure that they're broken all over again every single day. Because when you defy the bastards, what you're declaring is, you're not broken. And a people who are not broken are a people who will resist, a people who will fight, a people who will defeat their oppressors. And if one of you does it, then they have to wonder how long before more of you jump on board, because they know that a lot of us have to feel the same way. This is fear that you see from the white right. White supremacy is a house of cards, and a slight breeze would be enough to knock it all over. And if that happens, then those who benefit from it would be in a hell of a fix too. So they can't allow us to have any power at all, because if we gain any power, then it's not going to be a breeze that hits that house of cards. It's going to be a hurricane. This performative racism that we see the Christopher Rufos and others putting on in their safe little red, well, I'm not going to use the full red N word, I'd like to, but in their little urban cowboy enclaves, these clowns are sitting here in places that they control top to bottom and pretending like they're doing big things. All of this racial warring against black children, it's the white supremacists trying to get their little courage up, trying to build their little confidence, to reassure themselves that they've still got some power, but they need us to acknowledge that too, and they need for us not to challenge them. Well, let me tell you something. When the white supremacists hit you, you're supposed to hit back, only harder. I told you that these racists in Florida wouldn't be relying on fellow white supremacists bringing civil suits against the teachers, that the government of the state would have to attack those who they wanted to go after. The law said that it would give parents or certain interested parties, read right-wing think tanks and political front groups, the ability to sue the school districts. But I told you that wouldn't be enough, not even enough by half. I'm sure you've all heard about the stuff going down in Florida with Disneyland. By the way, neither DeSantis nor Disneyland are our friends. These are white supremacists having an argument amongst themselves. But it does show that DeSantis has certainly overplayed his hand at this point. He got a little bit too full of himself, crafting legislation to go after a specific individual, or in this case, business, simply because they disagree with your politics. Not to mention, DeSantis has most likely violated qualified immunity, which only protects politicians so long as they are not proven to have intentionally and deliberately written a law for the express purpose of harming someone. Qualified immunity is only supposed to protect you if you unintentionally do harm in the normal course of your duties. But when you sit down and say, I'm going to write a law specifically to go after this company because they said something I don't like, well, you no longer get to claim that the harm was incidental. The harm was the entire point. There's a long-standing body of law on this, by the way. Corporations happen to be persons in the eyes of the law. I don't agree with that at all, of course, but, white supremacy writes the rules. And that being the case, a corporation also has a citizen's right to free speech. That's what the whole Citizens United thing was about. So if you have a company that comes under fire by the legislature that deliberately targets them because the legislature's gotten away with beating up on black kids for all this time, well, what's going to happen is they're going to say, hey, these black people didn't have the power to harm us. We don't think these corporations will either. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. But what this has all proven to us is, as I've been telling you, the GOP's been waging a jihad to try to cram the federal courts with Federalist Society operatives who will ignore the law and simply rule according to their organization's political goals. Now, the thing to remember is these right-wing organizations, they're all working together with each other. This is not some loose affiliation, or it just happens to be you got one group doing something over here, another group doing something over there. The ties and connections between these organizations like the Heritage Foundation and the Manhattan Institute and these other terrorist groups, these organizations have incestuous ties with one another. You start looking around and you see that this GOP congressperson over here is married to this Federalist Society judge over there. Yes, I'm talking about Clarence Thomas. And you find out that these guys are also either receiving money from or giving money to the Manhattan Institute, which was started by a Reagan alumni, Bill Casey, who was Reagan's director of the CIA in the 1980s. And that these are the guys coming up with these phony moral panics and these phony moral hysterias about how they got to do something to prove their little old power. Groups like the Manhattan Institute use their money to pay crisis actors to go to school boards in red states and pretend to be outraged while lying about the school's curriculum. And that shouldn't surprise you. William Casey was Ronald Reagan's CIA director, as I said. This is the exact same kind of phony protests and phony demonstrations that the U.S. would fund and organize in foreign countries. And then the white media would show right up and start cheerleading for them and saying, these are freedom fighters fighting against the autocratic regime of so-and-so Maduro or Saddam Hussein or whoever the elected leader was who the United States wants to get removed. This is the exact same playbook that the U.S. used in order to foment revolts and revolutions in countries whose leaders refused to toe the line for Washington. They would have individuals like jackals and such who would try to find dissident elements or just go ahead and pay them, just create them on your own. And you pay them to do some sort of demonstration and you pay them to get in front of the cameras and you pay them to raise holy hell. And that being the case, it either justifies some sort of invasion by the U.S. if you can manage it, or at the very least, it's supposed to make it where the regime comes under such fire that they topple. The U.S. has been doing this all over the world. And now you have an organization that was started by Ronald Reagan's CIA director, and they're doing it right here in the U.S. at the local level. Please understand what it is that you're seeing. And then, having created a crisis that doesn't exist, here they come along proposing a solution to the problem that they created. The Republicans in those red states point to those school board meetings and say, see, the parents, they've had enough of all of this nigger meddling in their affairs. It's time to set things to rights. And then they start putting forward laws, which in many cases are merely trolling as legislation, but the laws, if enforced seriously, actually make it where the entire portions of the Constitution get completely and thoroughly nullified, which is the entire point. They write a law saying that you cannot say anything about racism in schools, and you certainly can't say that people are oppressed or that people are oppressors in schools, and then they write a law saying, you know what, you can't do it in the workplace either. So now they're controlling what can be said in schools and even what you can say in your own privately owned business. Now, weren't the Republicans the ones who lectured everybody that schools need to be places where ideas are discussed? Why, you should be able to discuss and be exposed to all manner of ideas. Hey, how about America's race as a country is racist? Well, that's an idea we don't want people exposed to. And businesses are supposed to be their own little islands and bastions of capitalism, privately owned dictatorships, if you will. You don't tell business what to do. If people don't like the way that you do business, they can go find another job, or people can go and buy goods from somebody else. Let the free market decide. Let the employees decide if they want to work at a place that practices these kind of workplace practices. Let the customers decide if they want to give their hard-earned money to a business that has these business practices. That's what it used to be, right? Yeah, that is, until the winds of change began blowing. Now they're saying, to hell with that. We're going to tell you what you can and cannot say. Now, these are blatant violations of the Constitution, but as I've told you time and again, that old lawyer saying is true. It's more important to know the judge than it is to know the law. So you have the Manhattan Institute that uses their money and their operatives to gin up a phony, staged outrage and nonsense rabble-rousers at the local school board. Then you have the Republican politicians who point at this staged, phony bit of agitprop. That means agitation propaganda. And they say, we need laws. We're going to write some laws. Oh, look at this. We just happen to have these laws that we wrote 10 years ago and couldn't get passed for any reason. Well, we think we got a good enough majority in the state legislature we can get it through now. And then finally, you got the Federalist Society. This gang of right-wing extremists on the bench, so that when all of these illegal state laws inevitably get challenged in court, you'll have some unqualified political flunky, like the one in Florida who struck down the mask mandate, who will simply declare that the right-wing position is correct no matter how illegal it clearly is. We're slowly but surely putting the bastards' backs to the wall. We're depriving them of their bootlicks and sock puppets who they infiltrated the black community with. So this is their response. But understand that the desperation and rage of the white right also reflects the current mindset of the white left as well. You see the white media talking about that all the time. There's problems on the left too. They say left, they're talking about black people because we're the only ones who are making any noise. The only real difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is merely rhetorical. Different words, but the exact same goal. That's a distinction without a difference. Now, in every war, there's turncoats and double agents. The Democrats fall in the latter category. They can't be turncoats because they were never part of our group to begin with. They're not from our ranks. They're double agents. They claim to be our allies, but in reality, they work for the enemy, just like the Republicans do. Now, Democrats are doing absolutely nothing about all of this targeting of black children in the schools and all the rest of this nonsense that you see the white right doing. The Democrats are not doing anything about it. They're not even saying anything about it. Well, actually, that's not true. There are a number of them who are saying things about it, and they sound just like Ron DeSantis. Talking about James Carvey. What's all this woke stuff? That woke thing. And of course, nigga Jim Clyburn, stop sloganizing. Stop saying defund the police. Stop sloganizing. Now, of course, what they tried to make it seem like was, well, it's just this defund the police thing that we disagree with. And then when you look and see what's happening in the schools, you realize, no, the Democrats happen to be in there with the Republicans. We need to stop all this talk about racial justice because this is destabilizing the status quo. And the Democrats are as dedicated to maintaining the status quo and preserving it as the Republicans are. The Democrats are controlled opposition. But what goes unsaid is that their job is to control you. If you want a system of oppression to stand for the long term, then you have to give those who you oppress the delusion that they can influence the system through an apparatus that you thoroughly control. They have to believe that they are something other than completely and thoroughly oppressed in a rigged system that's completely and thoroughly fixed up from top to bottom to not respond to anything that they say to make sure that their condition doesn't change. In other words, you have to present the people who you're oppressing with one of your tools, or better yet, get one of the oppressed to present your tool to the masses for you. And you tell the oppressed that this tool is going to be their representative. And it's going to look like, why? See, you have access to the exact same levers of power just like the dominant society does. But the problem, of course, is whenever you tell the tool to do something for you, all they do is tell you what they can't do. And so the oppressed will waste all their time trying to get the dominant society's tool to change the system when the tool's entire job was to prevent the oppressed from ever changing it in the first place. Oppression is when one group attempts to assign a place in the society to another group against their will and against their interest. Chattel slavery is one way of doing it. It's the most direct and unvarnished form of assigning a place to people in the society. But another way is to give them the phony illusion that somehow they're included in the political process. You go ahead and you give them some phony representatives and say, these are the people who are speaking for your interests. These are the people who are going to represent you. All you got to do is get enough of them in office and why things could change. With chattel slavery, you use chains and whips in order to force the oppressed to be restrained. On the other hand, if you've decided that you're going to use a more sophisticated form of control, the illusion of inclusion, then what you're doing is you're getting the oppressed to restrain themselves. This is what the Democratic Party is about. This is why I keep telling you that we're going to have to force the system to do things it wasn't designed to do. It wasn't designed to respond to your needs or to listen to you. It was designed to ignore you. We will have to make that impossible. This isn't about playing nice. This isn't about influencing the system. It's about imposing our will on it, to force it to do what we want because they'll never do it willingly. Now, this is where black people keep failing. They think that force means to merely make a demand and walk away, but that's nothing. Force means to confront, to bums rush them, to invade and take over the floor of debate, and to force the discussion and policy decisions to go in the directions we want. And you'll know when you're doing it right, because all of these bootlicking, bought-off Negro tools who have been holding public office, or they've been part of these do-nothing civil rights organizations, those clowns will suddenly come out of the woodwork running and screaming and saying that we're messing things up for everyone. Well, let me tell you something. Making sure that black children happen to be safe and secure in these schools, that's got to be a top priority for us. And the children cannot be out there by themselves. They'll have no respect for any black people who are older than themselves, nor should they have respect for any black people older than themselves when they have to fight all their battles themselves. Black parents in particular, too many black parents want to be parenting on cruise control. The problem has not been that black parents haven't known about this. The problem is that the response from these black parents has been far too weak. In many cases, there have been no response at all. The answer to the Benji Arnolds and the answer to the Locust Grove racists is the kind of vigor and strength that we saw on display in 2020. That's the answer to white supremacist aggression, 2020. When police saw that the protesters were not going to be going to City Hall, they were actually coming to people's homes. They were making it where the protest is literally going to take place in your front yard. See, the white supremacists, they think that they're safe because as far as they're concerned, things have calmed down. People have gone back to being apathetic. Why? They've been testing the electric fence over and over again and they haven't gotten zapped, so it's only emboldened these white supremacists to go farther, to see how far they can go before they finally encounter resistance. And now they're making it a point to have a full-fledged open war against black children. And too many of these black parents are doing absolutely nothing about it. And let's not lie and pretend as if that's happening, because it's not. When the kids are the ones having to lead a demonstration, when the kids are the ones having to stage a walkout, that means the parents ain't doing the doggone jobs. And we better start being honest about that. Because the people who refuse to take care of their children when they're young, that's a people whose children will not do a thing for them when they get old. These white supremacists went to these school boards and had their little staged, phony displays of pathetic, I don't even know what to call it, anger, just basically pretending to be angry about something. Black parents got something to really be angry about. Their children are actually being harmed. Harmed by teachers, harmed by students, harmed by school administrators. If anybody has every right to be raising hell at these school board meetings, it's black parents. Where are they? Why aren't they doing it? There is no black student who's ever supposed to be taking the Pledge of Allegiance, singing the Star-Spangled Banner, any of that crap. This country is a white supremacist apartheid state, and that being the case, black children in particular need to be raised on the mother's milk of truth. They need to realize that they are in a fight for their very lives, and the sooner they start fighting, the sooner they can win this fight. So yeah, you make certain the kids understand there is no honor in deciding to show respect for a flag in a country that shows no respect for you. But as black parents, you can only do that when you lead by example. The children need to have parents who they can be proud of because they see that when somebody comes at them, mom and dad are on their butts, aggressively, in their faces. We're not sitting back waiting for any do-nothing controlled opposition Democrats to do anything. We know they're not going to. We're going to be protecting black children's dignity and safety ourselves. There should never be any teacher who feels so bold that they can tell a black child, I'll give you 0 marks simply because you refuse to take the Pledge of Allegiance. They should never be forming their mouths to talk to a black child like that. So it's time for black parents to step up. Main reason that all this racism goes on for so long is because black parents let it. Black children understand that their parents aren't actually going to be coming in to do anything. Black children understand they're by themselves, and these white supremacists in these schools understand it too. And miss me with the excuses about, people are stepping up. No, they're not. Those school board meetings should be full of black parents, and they're not. Better yet, those schools' principal offices should have black parents in there laying down the law and making it clear we see what the hell you're doing, and we're here to make sure that it stops. So as we saw with the case of Marie Oliver, this stuff goes on for years and years and years and years because it's allowed to go on for years and years. And that falls on black parents whose job it is to make sure that stuff gets stopped immediately. You don't need any state legislature to make the kind of changes to the educational curriculum that black children need. They need black parents to change that school curriculum. Instead of teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, black children need to get comfortable with reading, writing, and revolution. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Mouse, Lisa Cabrera, Jean Florival, Tyquin Campbell, and William Johnson. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.